Dad's face went blank, and Mom's eyes filled with tears. "You're throwing away everything we've worked for," Dad said, his voice full of shock. "Don't you understand what this will do?" I shook my head and spoke quietly but firmly. "I understand, Dad, but I have to live my own life, not the one you planned for me. Glenn makes me happier than I've ever been. I can't ignore that." Mom's tears fell as her voice shook. "We just want what's best for you. We thought we were guiding you toward a good life." I looked at them, my heart aching. "I know, but what you think is best for me isn't what I really need. I love you both, but I have to follow my own way." There was a long silence. My parents were hurt and disappointed, and it was clear they didn't understand my decision. They weren't ready to accept it. Before we begin, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell for notifications. Welcome to Revenge Scales, where justice always wins. Hi, I'm Sophia Bennett. Let me share a story that has changed my life. It's about family expectations, my decision to go my own way, and finding my own path. I'm 22, but I've been fighting my family's expectations for as long as I can remember. Growing up, my twin sister Mel and I were always compared. She seemed to be perfect, doing well in business school, fitting the role of the ideal daughter. Meanwhile, I was always struggling to keep up with her and meet the high standards set for both of us. Our parents, Dr. Thomas Bennett and Helen Bennett, had very high expectations. My dad was a respected university professor, known for his serious attitude and dedication to his career. He expected nothing less than the best from himself and his family. My mom, on the other hand, was the perfect homemaker, focused on keeping our family's image perfect. She believed that being a good daughter meant following traditional rules. They had clear ideas about what they wanted for Mel and me, but it never fit with who I really was. From a young age, I felt like I didn't fit into their plans. It felt like I was always being watched, judged by their high expectations. My dad always praised Mel for her good grades, seeing her as a reflection of his success. My mom wanted me to be like her, perfect and traditional. To them, success meant getting good grades, getting a prestigious job, and marrying the right person. For years, I tried to fit their mold. I wore the clothes they liked, followed their rules, and tried to be the daughter they wanted. But deep down, I felt something pushing me to break free and live my life on my terms. I didn't want to be known only for my family's achievements, or live in Mel's shadow. I wanted to make choices that were true to who I was, not just to make them happy. It wasn't about rejecting their love, it was about finding my own way. Small acts of rebellion were how I showed my struggle. Instead of wearing the clothes they liked, I started trying bold makeup and more unique outfits. They didn't like it, but to me, it was a step toward finding my own identity. It wasn't easy, the pressure to be like them was heavy, but each small defiance gave me more courage to be the person I wanted to be. Now, looking back, I see that it wasn't just about going against them, it was about finding the strength to live my life as myself, even if it meant disappointing the people I loved. That struggle has shaped who I am today, someone determined to live on her own terms. For the first time, I feel like I'm discovering my true path. The turning point came when I met Glenn. I was in the university library, struggling with homework. When he walked in, Glenn was a carpenter in his 30s, nothing like anyone I'd met before. He had a way of making the simple things in life feel special, and he lived his life freely, without caring about others' expectations or the plans my parents had for me. We started talking more, and soon I realized how much I enjoyed being with him. With Glenn, I could be myself, no pretending, no fear. One night, while we were at a cozy cafe, Glenn took my hand and looked into my eyes. "Sophia," he said softly, "I know this may sound crazy, but I see a future for us, a future where we're both free to be ourselves." A rush of emotions hit me. It was the first time someone talked about a future that wasn't shaped by others' expectations. Glenn wasn't just talking about marriage, he was offering me a chance to live a life where I could be free to make my own choices, without living by anyone else's rules. When Glenn proposed, I knew my parents would never approve. They always imagined me with someone who matched their idea of success, someone with the right academic and social background. But Glenn was nothing like that. He lived freely and did things his own way, far from the strict rules my parents cared about. Still, I said yes. For the first time, I was choosing to live for myself. It was a big step, and it led to some of the hardest decisions of my life. When it was time to introduce Glenn to my parents, I was nervous. My heart raced as I brought him into the house, hoping they could see how happy he made me, but I was afraid of how they would react. Dad was in his study, surrounded by books and papers, barely looking up. Mom was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, looking distant. "Sophia, there you are," Mom said as we walked in. She glanced at Glenn, her eyes narrowing. "And who's this?" I took a deep breath. "Mom, Dad, this is Glenn. He's a carpenter, and he's really important to me." Dad finally looked up from his papers, giving Glenn a critical look. Glenn smiled warmly. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. and Mrs. Bennett," he said calmly. "Tell us about yourself," Dad said, his voice polite but distant. Glenn's smile stayed strong. I'm a carpenter, as Sophia said. I love what I do, and I believe in living my life my own way. I know it might seem different, but I think it's important to be true to yourself. Mom's lips tightened, and Dad's face grew even more critical. It was clear they weren't impressed. Dinner was tense. I tried to change the topic, but each time, they responded with cold indifference. Dad watched Glenn closely, looking for reasons to disapprove, while Mom seemed to be preparing a speech in her head. After dinner, I knew the confrontation I feared was coming. As we were leaving, Dad called me to the study. My stomach turned as I followed him, with Glenn behind me. Once inside, Dad closed the door and looked serious. Sophia, he said, I need to be honest. We've always had certain expectations for you and your sister. It's important for our family's future and reputation. I tried to stay calm. I understand, Dad, but Glenn makes me happy. Doesn't that matter? Dad's face grew even sterner. It's not just about happiness, Sophia. It's about making decisions that fit our values and the future we've planned. Glenn, even though he may be a good person, doesn't fit that picture. Mom nodded, her eyes fixed on me. We've always been clear about what we expect. If you choose Glenn, you need to understand it goes against everything we've worked for. Glenn's worried gaze met mine. Sophia, what are they saying? Dad took a deep breath and then gave me an ultimatum. You have a choice, Sophia. Either you stay with us and follow the path we've set, which means ending this relationship, or you choose Glenn and leave this family behind. It's up to you. Dad's words hit me hard. I had always known this moment might come, but facing it was different. My heart raced as I tried to understand the choice. Glenn held my hand, offering comfort. Whatever you choose, I'll support you, he said softly, but I hope you choose what truly makes you happy. His words, full of honesty and support, left me torn. I had spent my whole life trying to meet my parents' expectations, but now I had to choose between my happiness and their approval. It was a choice no one should have to make, but it was my reality. As I left the study, I knew this decision would change everything. It wasn't just about choosing Glenn or my parents. It was about choosing my future and what I wanted in life. The uncertainty and pressure were overwhelming, but the path ahead also felt exciting. The next few days were filled with sleepless nights and constant thoughts about what to do. I knew this decision would change everything in my life. Whatever I chose would come with challenges, but for the first time, I felt hopeful and determined to live for myself. The days after my parents' ultimatum were tough. Every conversation with them felt like a battle. I knew choosing Glenn meant leaving the life I'd known, but the more I thought about it, the clearer my path became. Glenn and I spent hours talking about our future, from everyday details to our hopes and fears. His support made me feel less alone. He was my rock, the person who made me feel like I was finally living for myself instead of trying to meet others' expectations. One night, as we sat together in his small apartment, Glenn took my hands. Sophia, no matter what happens, I'm here for you. I know this is hard, but I believe in us. His words calmed me. I just don't know how to tell them, I said, my voice breaking. I know it will hurt them, but I can't keep living their way. Glenn gently squeezed my hands. It's not about hurting them, it's about choosing your happiness. You deserve to live a life that feels right to you. The decision was made. I couldn't live a life controlled by my parents anymore. I was ready to embrace a future with Glenn, even if it meant leaving my family behind. That weekend, I decided to have one last conversation with my parents. I wanted them to see how serious I was. My heart pounded as I entered the family home. Mom and Dad were sitting in the living room, waiting. I took a deep breath. I've made my decision. I'm choosing Glenn. I can't keep living a life that isn't true to who I am. Dad's face hardened, and Mom's eyes filled with tears. Sophia, you're throwing away everything we've worked for, Dad said, his voice full of disbelief. Don't you see the impact this will have? I shook my head and spoke firmly. I see the impact, Dad, but I have to live my life, not the one you've planned. Glenn makes me happy in a way I've never felt before, and I can't ignore that. Mom's tears flowed as her voice trembled. We just want what's best for you. We thought we were guiding you toward a successful life. I understand, I said, heartbroken, but your idea of what's best for me isn't the same as what I need. I love you both, but I have to follow my own path. The conversation ended in silence. My parents were hurt and disappointed, struggling to understand. It was clear they weren't ready to accept my decision. I knew that choosing Glenn meant closing a chapter with my family. It wasn't easy, but it was a step toward my happiness. Glenn and I moved forward, though it wasn't easy. We faced the challenges of starting over, finding a place, and adjusting to our new life together. We got married in a small ceremony with Glenn's friends and family. It wasn't what my parents might have imagined, but it was perfect for us. As we exchanged vows, I felt fulfilled, knowing I was making a choice for myself. The next months were full of adjustments. Glenn's carpentry business started doing better after he took advanced training. Watching him grow and succeed was inspiring. We bought a modest home outside Chicago, in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't big, but it was ours. Glenn even built a custom dining table, his first big project in our new home. Sitting around that table, we often talked about our dreams and the life we were creating. I started working as the coordinator for his business, managing schedules and finances. It felt good to contribute and be part of something we were building together. Despite the joy in our lives, I missed my parents. Their silence was a constant reminder of what I had given up. Every day, I hoped they'd come around and see the life I was building and that I was happy. But weeks turned into months, and their absence hurt more. I convinced myself they might reach out eventually. Then, one day, they did, but not the way I expected. My father had gotten into trouble at the university, and his reputation was ruined. He lost his job, and Mel and her husband cut ties with them. With nowhere else to turn, my parents reached out to me as their last hope. It was hard to see my parents standing there, looking exhausted and broken, needing help. For a moment, the child in me wanted to comfort them, to be the daughter they wanted, but the hurt and betrayal they caused me still stung. I remembered how they disapproved of my choices and turned their backs on me, and it felt like an open wound. I listened to their plea, my heart torn. They sounded regretful, but it wasn't the kind of regret that wanted to fix things. It was regret born out of desperation. That's when I realized that, despite their need, I had already chosen the life I had built with Glenn. It was my happiness, my independence, and I couldn't go back to what they wanted for me. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you," I said firmly, my voice heavy with sorrow. "I've made a new life, and I need to protect it. I can't undo what I've chosen." Their shock and pain made it clear that the bond we once had was gone. When I closed the door behind them, it felt like the end. It was painful, but also freeing. I knew I had made the right choice, and with Glenn by my side, I was ready for whatever came next. Life with Glenn wasn't always easy, but every moment was worth it. We made our new house a home, with small touches that made it ours, like the bookshelf Glenn built and the herb garden I started. My job helping run his business kept me busy, and seeing our hard work pay off was rewarding. Glenn's carpentry business was doing well, and with his new certification, he made a good income. We could finally dream about our future. One evening, as we sat together, I said, "Despite everything, we've created something amazing." Glenn smiled back at me with pride in his eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you." Our joy grew when we found out I was pregnant. It was a surprise, but we were so excited. Glenn poured his heart into creating the nursery, making every piece of furniture by hand, the crib, the rocking chair, even the shelves. Everything was made with love, his way of preparing for our new baby. When our son Sawyer was born, it was a beautiful moment. Holding him for the first time was pure love and hope. He represented the future we dreamed of, a fresh start, and all the joy we had created together. Even though my parents weren't part of it, I felt peace knowing I had found happiness with Glenn. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had brought me to a place where I could be myself. One night, as Glenn and I stood in the nursery, he touched the crib he built and said, "This crib is just the beginning. I'll build a future for him that he'll be proud of." I wiped away tears and nodded, "And we'll do it together." The road ahead would have its challenges, but with love, hope, and strength, we'd face them together. Our life was more fulfilling than anything we could have imagined. Thanks for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. If you liked the story, subscribe and like the video to hear more. Your support means everything.